St. Mary's Dormitory stands on the edge of an old college town, built back in the 1950s. From the outside, it looks no different from any other dorm building. Red bricks cloaked in moss, frosted glass windows, long hallways stretching endlessly. But for the students who once lived there, St. Mary's has always been shrouded in bizarre rumors that no one dares to speak aloud at night. And at the heart of every story lies room 313. This room has been locked tight for over 3 decades. No one knows why, only that the student who once occupied it, a young man named Michael, vanished without a trace on a stormy night. Afterward, the school sealed the door, layering gray paint over the old wooden frame, letting time cover it in dust and mold. Generations of students passed through, but no one was allowed to step inside that room. The hallway leading to room 313 is unnaturally cold, even during sweltering summer days. The fluorescent lights overhead frequently flicker, buzzing like labored breaths. On the walls, paint peels in patches, revealing damp bricks beneath. On rainy nights, the wind whistles through the old window frames, creating chilling sounds like whispers echoing from inside the walls. A musty, moldy scent permeates the entire corridor. Even though the janitors clean regularly, the odor lingers, thickest near room 313. Many students instinctively quicken their pace, avoiding direct eye contact with the gray door. Some say that if you stand too long, you can hear faint knocking from within. 3 short taps, then silence. The dormitory becomes eeriest in winter. At midnight, everything falls silent, except for the wind shrieking through the windows and the ticking clock echoing from the ground floor superintendent's office. In the darkness, the yellow light along the hallway near room 313 flickers like a dying candle, dimming and brightening unpredictably. Once, a student studying late swore he saw a shadowy figure standing just behind the frosted glass of the door, even though it had been locked for decades. Sound is what makes the dorm truly terrifying. At night, when all is still, unexplainable noises drift through the empty hallways, slow footsteps along the floorboards, creaking wooden doors opening though no one is near, even weak, hoarse coughing coming from behind room 313's door. Some daring students pressed their ears to the door to listen closer, and all reported a freezing draft that made their skin crawl. These eerie effects make the dorm feel like a box of cursed memories. Anyone entering is consumed by a mix of anxiety and curiosity. The initial chill may be slight, but as the night deepens, tension mounts. One can almost sense an invisible presence, an ever-watchful gaze following every move. Student legend holds that on the night Michael disappeared, a storm raged like never before. At 11:30 p.m., some classmates saw him enter room 313. But when the superintendent checked the next morning, the room was empty, save for a notebook lying on the floor, its pages scratched out in messy, indecipherable lines. Since that night, no one has dared sleep in that room again. Tonight, St. Mary's Dormitory is again drenched in relentless rain. Water patters against the windows, mingling with the whistling wind. The hallway leading to room 313 feels gloomier than usual. And tonight, a new student, Ethan, has just been assigned a room along this very hallway. No one told him that he would be living next to the room that has been sealed for decades. Ethan's footsteps echo on the cold, damp tiles as he drags his suitcase down the hall. Each step seems to blend with the mysterious rhythm emanating from the gray door numbered 313. The fluorescent lights above flicker, wavering as if about to die out completely. For a fleeting moment, Ethan thinks he hears something, a faint sound, like a weak sigh slipping from behind the locked door. He stops, heart pounding, staring at the faded numbers. 3113. For some reason, the cold from the iron frame seeps into his skin. Ethan feels as if the room is waiting for him, a silent invitation, heavy with menace. When the door of the neighboring room creaks open, light spills into the hallway, startling Ethan. It's another student, Ryan, who will be staying along the same hallway. Ryan smirks teasingly. Don't stand near that door too long, or you'll hear things you don't want to hear. Ethan hesitates, unsure whether Ryan is joking or warning him. Yet deep inside, a sense of unease begins to creep in, and room 313, though tightly locked, seems to be silently watching his every move from the shadows. Ethan Parker is the main character of the story. He is a first-year computer science student, just moving into St. Mary's to begin a new life away from his family. Ethan is naturally quiet and reserved, preferring to observe rather than participate. Coming from a small town, he has never been accustomed to the noise and complexity of dorm life. For Ethan, having a place on campus is a stroke of luck, saving him commuting costs. But deep down, he harbors a vague unease. Does he truly belong here? Ethan's room is located right next to room 313. He shares the hall with two new roommates, Ryan Mitchell and Daniel Carter. Ryan is a second-year student, outgoing and lively, fond of telling ghost stories, often using them to scare newcomers. He is tall, with messy brown hair, usually carrying an energy drink in his hand. In contrast, Daniel is quiet, studying medicine, and often stays up late to study. Daniel is disciplined, but sometimes his gaze drifts toward room 313 with something unusual, almost as if he knows more than he lets on. Then there's Chloe Adams, a classmate of Ethan's. Chloe is petite, with long black hair and a gentle smile. She helps Ethan adjust to the new environment, but she is also the first to warn him about the strange happenings around room 313. Chloe reveals that her sister had once lived in the dorm many years ago and was the one who heard the eerie noises coming from that room. These characters form a small circle around Ethan, companions, but also potential witnesses to the horrifying phenomena he is about to face. Beyond these flesh and blood individuals, there is another presence, a supernatural entity confined within room 313. People only know that since Michael's disappearance, the room has not been normal. Some rumors claim it is Michael's restless spirit, never having left. Others whisper of something else, a shadow, not human, that occupied the room even before Michael vanished. Michael's memory lingers in the stories of some older faculty during small tea gatherings. He was once an outstanding student of literature, often writing late into the night under the desk lamp. But after moving into room 313, friends say he began to change. He communicated less, often heard voices calling him at night, and wrote incomprehensible diary entries. On the final night he was seen, a violent storm raged and he disappeared, leaving only a notebook with scrawled words. "It's waiting in the dark. It knows my name." Since then, students have referred to the mysterious presence as Entity 313. No one can say for sure what it wants, but many believe it waits for someone weak or curious enough to open that door again. In the early days, Ethan tries to adapt, attending classes with Chloe and talking with Ryan and Daniel. But the more time he spends, the more he realizes that room 313 is not just a name from rumors. Each night, Ethan must pass by the door, and he begins to feel with increasing clarity that he is being watched. Once, returning late from class, the hallway was so silent that he could hear his own shoes tapping against the tiles. As he passed room 313, he saw Ryan standing at the far end of the hall. Ethan was about to call out, but Ryan silently raised a finger to his lips. Shh! Then, from behind the gray door came 3 distinct knocks. Not loud, but unmistakable, enough to make Ethan feel his heart drop. When he turned to look at Ryan, his face was pale. That was the only time Ryan had lost his usual joking demeanor. In this story, each character contributes a piece of the puzzle. Ethan is the one who will directly confront the terrifying truth. Ryan brings the rumors, only to be consumed by them himself. Daniel, with his suspicious silence, may know more secrets than anyone. And Chloe is both companion and witness to what Ethan faces. And finally, the entity in room 313, the faceless, nameless presence, existing only through sounds and chill, will gradually reveal its horrifying truth. For now, Everything is still in its early stages. But Ethan does not yet know that living next to room 313 is no coincidence. It is the beginning of a chain of events from which there is no escape, where the boundary between the living and the trapped spirit begins to blur. No one at St. Mary's can say exactly when room 313 began to become different. But fragments of memories, whispers passed down, and leftover diary entries from the past have pieced together a vague, ominous picture of the origin of the haunting in that room. They say that before Michael, the student who vanished mysteriously, moved in, room 313 was just a normal dorm room, inhabited by generations of students. But over 30 years ago, a chilling event occurred. The story centers around a student named Elijah Moore. He was a literature major, introverted, often recording strange dreams in a notebook. Elijah had the habit of staying up late, sitting by the window of room 313, writing while listening to music from an old cassette player. His roommate from that time recounted that, over several months, Elijah began to change. He slept less, grew gaunt, his eyes darkened, yet he constantly whispered about a figure standing in the corner of the room. Elijah believed that every night, at exactly 3:13 a.m., a knocking would sound at the door. Not everyone could hear it, only him. One evening, his roommate returned late and found Elijah sitting motionless on the bed, eyes wide, staring at the blank wall. When asked what was wrong, Elijah uttered only a fragmentary sentence. "It called my name. It knows I'm awake." A few days later, Elijah disappeared. No trace, no suitcase, no clothes. Room 313 was temporarily sealed, but the school quickly cleaned it and allowed new students to move in. No one could explain what had happened. From then on, rumors began. The room housed an entity that always sought to communicate with the living, especially those who were lonely or vulnerable. Years later, Michael repeated the same tragic fate. His final notes made the past clearer. In the notebook found under his bed, the last pages were scrawled in chaotic handwriting, as if written in panic. "It stands by the door every night. It whispers when the rain falls. I think Elijah never left. He's still here." This fueled the hypothesis that Elijah's spirit had been trapped in the room, unable to move on, and over time had warped into something no longer human. No longer Elijah, the entity had become a distorted presence, a shadow hungering to draw others in with it. Not everyone believed the rumors. An old professor who once taught at St. Mary's suggested that Elijah had a mental illness and his disappearance was merely an escape. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why did Michael, decades later, record the same details? In the dorm, students whisper about the 3 knocks at the door of room 313 at midnight. Some swear they have heard it. Others claim to see the lights inside flicker, even though the lock has long rusted shut. Some say that passing the hallway, they glimpse a reflection in the frosted glass. Not their own, but the face of a thin, hollow-eyed man standing silently. Through stories from Ryan and Chloe, Ethan begins to piece together the fragments. Ryan often jokes, but his voice sometimes trembles when mentioning Elijah's name. Chloe is more serious. She says her sister had studied here and had heard the knocking herself. Though afraid to look directly, one night she saw a faint bluish light leaking through the crack of room 313's door, like a flickering flame. Daniel is different. He never speaks, but his eyes flare with suppressed fear whenever Elijah or Michael is mentioned. Once, when Ethan asked him directly, Daniel replied curtly, "Don't open it. That door should never be opened." All these fragments lead to one conclusion. Room 313 is the prison of a trapped spirit. And the terrifying truth is that it does not merely reside there. It whispers, calls names, knocks on the door, seeking someone else to draw into its cursed cycle. The more Ethan hears, the more he feels himself being pulled into the story. Each time he passes the door, he feels not just a chill, but a strange compulsion to open it, to peek inside. On rainy nights, when the hall is silent, that compulsion grows stronger, as if an invisible thread is tugging him closer. The origin of the haunting in room 313 may be Elijah, or something else entirely. But one thing is certain, it is waiting. And Ethan, whether by chance or fate, has become its nearest neighbor, the one it can call at any moment. No one knows exactly what happened to Elijah and Michael, but when two names are tied to the same room, ending in the same disappearance, it is clear that the room has not been locked for decades by accident. It is not a place to live. It is a trap, and anyone who comes near, if weak-willed, will become the next victim. Ethan does not realize it yet, but in the coming nights, he will begin to hear the first sounds, the warning echoes of the horrifying loop preparing to repeat itself. The first week in the dorm passed fairly peacefully for Ethan. He quickly became acquainted with Ryan, Chloe, and even Daniel, though the latter rarely spoke. Everything seemed normal, until one cold, rainy night when the first signs began to appear. Ethan was sitting in his room, focused on a book under the pale yellow desk lamp. The wall clock neared midnight. Outside, the wind howled through the old window frames, carrying the sound of rain pelting the roof tiles. Suddenly, a very faint sound echoed. Clink, like metal striking metal. Ethan jumped, raising his head to scan the room. Nothing seemed out of place, but listening carefully, he realized the sound wasn't coming from his room. It came from the hallway outside. The sound rang out again. This time, clearer. 3 short, even knocks, echoing from the dark wooden door of room 313. Ethan held his breath. His heart raced, yet reason quickly offered an explanation. It's probably just the wind rattling the lock. Thinking this, he tried to force himself back to his book. But then, in the silence, he caught another sound. A very soft whisper, mingling with the patter of rain. It was indistinct, fragmented, as if someone was trying to speak through the thick walls. Ethan shivered and glanced at Ryan, still asleep, breathing evenly. Clearly, he was the only one who heard it. The next morning, Ethan told Chloe about it. At first, she laughed, saying he was probably just tired and imagining things. But her eyes flickered with something uneasy. "What time did you hear it?" she asked. Ethan replied, "Around midnight, 3 knocks." Chloe fell silent for a few seconds, then quickly changed the subject, as if deliberately avoiding it. In the following days, the strange phenomena began to repeat. At first, it was just the knocking. But soon, Ethan noticed the yellow hallway lights flickering whenever he passed room 313. Once he was certain he had locked his door, yet in the middle of the night, he awoke to find it slightly ajar, a cold draft slipping in. Ryan insisted he hadn't touched it. On another night, returning late from class, Ethan glimpsed a shadow standing in the hallway, directly in front of room 313. Its form was hazy, tall and thin, head slightly bowed, motionless like a statue. Ethan froze, but in the blink of an eye, it vanished, leaving the corridor empty. Gradually, Ethan felt the line between reality and illusion blur. He began to hear heavy footsteps echoing along the hall at 3 in the morning, when all other students were asleep. Strangely, the sound would stop right outside his door, as if someone stood there, waiting. Ryan remained oblivious, while Daniel seemed to avoid Ethan more. Once, summoning his courage, Ethan asked Daniel, "Have you ever heard knocking from room 313? Daniel paused, staring straight into Ethan's eyes. For a fleeting moment, his face turned pale. Then he looked away and said bluntly, "Don't let it hear you." The vague warning heightened Ethan's unease. From that day, he began to notice every detail around him. And then he discovered something strange. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the wall clock in his room would often stop for a few seconds, the second hand freezing before moving again. In that brief moment, Ethan swore he heard a whisper right next to his ear, though no one was there. The more he tried to find rational explanations, the more he felt himself being drawn into the mysterious spiral. The faint sounds, the flickering lights, all seemed like an invisible hand testing his courage step by step. The old wooden door of room 313 remained silent as it had for years, but for Ethan, it was no longer just a door. It was a gateway, and from behind it, something was whispering, patiently waiting. One night, as Ethan was drifting to sleep, he suddenly heard a clack, like metal turning in a lock, coming from room 313 itself. Ethan sprang up and peeked through the narrow hallway crack. Under the flickering yellow light, he saw the doorknob quiver, twisting slowly as if someone inside was trying to turn it. But the lock had long been rusted and no one had a key. Ethan's heart clenched. He rubbed his eyes, and when he looked again, everything was silent, as if nothing had happened. The first signs, though small and vague, were enough for Ethan to understand. That room was far from abandoned. It was alive, it could feel, and it was beginning to communicate with him in its own way. And deep down, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Ever since those nights of knocking, shadowy figures, and the rattling lock, Ethan's mind had become chaotic. He began to wonder, were these things real, or just hallucinations brought on by stress? By day, the dorm buzzed with noise, students chatting, shoes clattering on the hallway tiles, loudspeaker announcements from the cafeteria. Everything seemed so normal that Ethan felt foolish for believing what he'd experienced. But as night fell, the air shifted. The familiar sounds dissolved, replaced by a dreadful silence. And in that silence, the strange noises returned. One day, Ethan tried asking Ryan, "Hey, have you ever heard knocking from room 313? Ryan laughed, tossing his notebook aside. "You're watching too many horror movies. It's just mice or the pipes." Ryan was firm, without a hint of doubt. Ethan said nothing, but deep down, he knew what he heard wasn't a mouse or a pipe. It was a deliberate knock, rhythmic, purposeful, like someone sending a signal. Ethan then went to Chloe. She listened, her eyes more worried than Ryan's. But when Ethan mentioned the whisper right next to my ear, Chloe shook her head quickly. "Don't scare yourself, Ethan. You're just tired. Get some sleep and it'll stop." She held his hand, but the unease in her eyes didn't escape him. Chloe knew more than she wanted to say. The feeling of isolation began to wrap around him. Ethan could no longer be sure of what was real. Sometimes, walking in a crowded hallway, he thought he heard someone call his name. Soft, yet icy. "Ethan?" He'd turn, only to see in different faces, no one paying attention. Each night, Ethan recorded everything in a small notebook. Footsteps at 3 a.m., the clock freezing at 3:13, the rattling lock, the fleeting shadow. But when he showed Ryan, his friend only shrugged. "You really think I'll believe this? Maybe you're just hearing things and writing them down. The brain can trick you." That answer deepened Ethan's despair. The truth was strangling him, yet no one believed. He began withdrawing, speaking less, avoiding others. By day, he pretended to study. By night, he trembled, waiting for the knocking to come. One night, Ethan decided to test it. He set his phone to record near room 313's door, leaving it on all night. The next morning, listening back, his heart clenched. The recording clearly captured 3 knocks, followed by silence, then a long whisper, too faint to make out the words. Ethan rushed to play it for Ryan, but Ryan only shrugged again. "It's probably just ambient noise. Your phone picked up something else." No hint of belief. The loneliness gnawed at Ethan's mind. He began losing sleep. His eyes turned dark. His hands trembled. Some nights, staring into the dorm bathroom mirror, he thought his reflection lagged behind him, moving a beat late. Daniel was his last hope. One evening, Ethan followed him down a deserted hallway. "Daniel, you know what's happening in room 313, don't you?" Ethan pressed. Daniel stopped, turned. The yellow light cast his face in sharp shadows, stretching long across the wall. He stared at Ethan for a long moment, his gaze filled with fear and warning. Then he whispered, almost inaudibly, "There are things. You don't want to know." He turned and walked away, leaving Ethan frozen in silence. Doubt now spilled beyond its edges. Ethan didn't just question himself, he questioned everyone around him. Was Ryan truly not hearing it, or was he pretending? Why did Chloe avoid his questions? And what exactly did Daniel know? Night fell. Ethan lay on his bed, the desk lamp casting a dim glow over his half-finished notes. He muttered to himself, "I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy." But right then, from the hallway, came three slow, deliberate knocks. Ryan still slept soundly. Chloe wasn't there. Daniel couldn't save him. Only Ethan remained in the dim room, facing the dense darkness. And from deep within, a cold fear crept in. Perhaps he could no longer tell where reality ended and where the voice of the forgotten room began. Ethan was breaking. The sleepless nights bled together. His eyes had sunk into dark hollows. His skin had gone pale. But worse still, the strange events no longer stopped at knocks and flickers. They were clearer now, bolder, as if whatever lived in room 313 was no longer hiding, but daring him to keep his sanity. One evening, while Ethan tried to force himself to study, his desk lamp began to flicker. The light strobed, bright, dark, like someone was flipping a switch again and again. Ethan lifted his head, glaring at the bulb, and just then, the entire room went black. In the total darkness came a faint rustling, right behind him, as though someone was moving, slow and deliberate. Ethan spun, heart hammering, but there was only the dense night. Then a whisper brushed against his ear. "Leave this place." Ethan staggered back, slamming into his desk. The lights snapped on. Silence. He bolted into the hallway, almost shouting at Ryan and Chloe as they came toward him. "Didn't you see? Didn't you hear? This room, something's wrong." Ryan frowned. "Ethan, calm down. You're scaring yourself." Chloe placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Maybe you should rest or see a doctor." But Ethan knew he wasn't imagining it. The phenomena were escalating, and he was the only witness. The next night, as Ethan lay in bed, a violent noise erupted from room 313. Not knocking this time, but a thunderous pounding, like someone kicking the door. Ryan sat up, muttering, "What the hell? I heard it too." Ethan's eyes widened with panic. "See? It's not just me." Ryan went silent, his face flickering with unease, but then shook his head. "Could be the wind. Don't start with this again." Neither of them slept that night. Each day the activity became more blatant. Books slid off Ethan's desk. His wardrobe opened though he'd locked it. Once, as Ryan passed the hall, a voice called his name from room 313. He froze, then bolted. But the next morning, when Ethan asked, Ryan only muttered, "Nothing. I must have misheard." Ethan felt watched, even outside on the crowded campus, some unseen gaze trailing him. Every night, 3:13 a.m., the knocking came. Sometimes 3 times, sometimes 7, steady like a heartbeat. And now, not just knocking, slow, dragging footsteps down the hall. One stormy night, the dorm lost power. The whole building drowned in darkness, only lightning flashing through the windows. Ethan sat clutching his notebook. Each flash revealed a tall, thin figure before room 313, unmoving. Each darkness left the hall empty. Heart racing, Ethan ran to Chloe's room. She opened the door wide-eyed, seeing him drenched and trembling. Ethan whispered, "It's out there. I saw it." Chloe pulled him in, but neither spoke. Outside, the wind screamed, rain hammered the windows, popped, and something clawed at room 313's door. After that night, Ethan was no longer himself. He flinched at every sound, a pen falling, a door slamming, even wind through a crack. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, only wrote and stared at room 313, waiting for the horror to return. Daniel found him once in that state and dragged him into an empty corridor. He whispered, "You have to stop. If you keep feeding it, it will swallow you." Ethan gripped Daniel's hand, almost begging. "You know something, don't you? Tell me." Daniel glanced around, his eyes tight with fear, then shook his head. "No one will believe you, and no one can save you." Ethan went still. That answer only confirmed what he feared. He had become prey for room 313, and no one dared intervene. With each passing day, the supernatural grew more brazen, smothering all rational explanations. No more mishearing, no more stress. This was reality, undeniable, a black veil hanging over his every waking moment. He felt trapped in an invisible cage, every exit blocked, left alone with the slow, icy footsteps from the forgotten room, echoing endlessly. That night, the sky was black, a void swallowing every trace of moonlight. The wind howled through the dorm's ancient window frames, carrying with it mournful cries that seemed to come from another realm. Ethan sat motionless at his desk, eyes weary, hands trembling. Before him lay his notebook, packed with scribbles and detailed logs of every bizarre occurrence. But the final page bore only one phrase, written over and over. Room 313 is calling my name. The clock struck exactly 3:13 a.m. The familiar knocking erupted, no longer steady, but frantic, violent, as if a desperate hand pounded against the door from within. Each strike hit Ethan's chest like a hammer, stealing his breath. Ryan jerked awake, eyes wide. What the? It was no hallucination. This time, Ryan heard it clearly. He looked at Ethan, pale but with eyes burning a mad, determined fire. Ethan stood, voice hoarse. I have to open it. Ryan grabbed his arm instantly. You're insane. We need security. We need to get out of here. Ethan shoved him away, eyes bloodshot. No, it's calling me. If I don't face it, it will never stop. The pounding grew stronger, shaking the hallway. A chilling screech followed, like nails raking metal. Chloe burst from the opposite room, face pale. Oh God, you guys hear that? The three froze, staring at the shaking door of room 313, its paint peeling and splintering. Then suddenly the door slammed open with a dry, hollow crash. Inside was a darkness so thick that the hallway light couldn't penetrate. A blast of frigid air poured out, turning their breaths into white clouds. From the void, a skeletal hand reached out, charred black as if burned, clawing at the doorframe with a shrieking scrape. Ryan yelled, pulling Chloe back, but Ethan stepped forward, eyes empty, unblinking. A figure slowly emerged, tall, gaunt, twisted in posture, face hidden beneath tangled hair. Empty, black eyes stared directly at Ethan. Time froze, even the wind ceased. The entity's voice echoed from the depths of a well. You, take my place. In that instant, chaos erupted. The ceiling lights flickered wildly, then shattered, sending shards of glass flying. Ethan's books were sucked into the hallway, swirling in a vortex of bone-chilling wind. Ryan clutched Chloe, screaming, while Ethan stood paralyzed, unable to tear his gaze from the thing crawling out of the room. The darkness lunged. No longer human in shape, it moved like thick smoke, wrapping around Ethan. He fell backward, his body convulsing violently. Whispers overlapped, hundreds of voices from the dead chanting his name. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. Ryan lunged to pull him free, but was flung into the wall by an invisible force. Chloe screamed, eyes wide with horror, watching Ethan's face distort in agony, mouth agape, silent, as if strangled by the void. A lightning bolt ripped across the sky outside the window, illuminating the hallway. Chloe saw a second face layered over Ethan's own, a strange visage with hollow eyes and a mouth torn to the ears. Room 313 screamed as if alive. Doors slammed, walls shook, dust and debris falling everywhere. It was as if the building itself might collapse under the entity's rage. Ethan struggled to speak, barely a whisper. No, I don't belong to you. The shadow shrieked, a deafening howl shattering more window panes. Smoke and a charred, burning smell filled the hallway. Ryan scrambled, dragging Chloe away, but Ethan remained trapped beneath the nightmare. Time seemed to stop. Ethan knew this was the point of no return. Fight or be consumed. In desperation, he closed his eyes and yelled, I am not afraid of you. The shout echoed through the suffocating darkness. For a fleeting moment, the cold air slackened, and the shadow hesitated, seemingly surprised by his defiance. But in the next heartbeat, it surged again, gripping Ethan as if to crush him completely. The hallway erupted in chaos, screams, shattering glass, wind howling in fury. And in the center of it all, Ethan faced the entity that had haunted room 313 for decades. There was no turning back. The climax of terror had arrived. The hallway, narrow and endless, now felt like a tunnel straight into hell. The shadow wrapped tighter around Ethan, coiling like hundreds of icy chains. That monstrous face, with its hollow eyes and cracked, gaping mouth, drew closer, whispering in a dragging, distorted voice, You will take my place. Each word fell like a blade, slicing through his skull, making his head reel. He felt his blood freeze, fingers numb, his breath splintering into ragged gasps. In that instant, Ethan knew he was only seconds away from death. Ryan and Chloe were still there, screaming in vain. Ryan lunged again, but the shadow flung him back as if a wall of air had risen. Chloe sobbed, pounding on the hallway door, her voice breaking. "Let him go, Ethan! Don't give up!" Her cry was a fragile thread pulling Ethan back. In the darkness, memories flooded, leaving home for the city, his mother's worried eyes, his simple dreams of an ordinary life. He clung to those fragments like a small flame in a winter storm. Ethan clenched his teeth, screaming, "You don't get to choose my fate!" The shadow shrieked, the hallway shuddering harder. Walls cracked, dust billowed, lights flickered violently. The smoke tightened, trying to crush his will. Through the pain, Ethan struggled, his hand finding a shard of glass from a shattered bulb. Guided by instinct, he grabbed it and slashed his own arm. Bright red blood spilled onto the cold tiles. Instantly, the shadow convulsed, letting out a piercing wail. Chloe cried out, terrified, "Ethan, stop!" But Ethan understood. Living blood was what this spirit craved. If it wanted it, he would turn it into a weapon. His blood, his will, his final refusal. He raised his bleeding hand, shouting, "If you want it, take it all, but I will never become you." The space exploded. The darkness surged, engulfing Ethan completely. He collapsed, body trembling, eyes wide staring into nothingness. For a heartbeat, Ryan thought his friend had lost. But then, a faint light flickered from the center of the black vortex. Tiny, fragile, yet growing brighter, like a flame igniting an endless night. It wasn't from the lights or any candle. It came from inside Ethan. His voice rose, firm, cutting through the screams. "I choose to live." The light spread, pushing the darkness back. The entity screamed in rage, its form twisting, cracking like shattered glass. The countless faces once layered over Ethan cried out, dissolving piece by piece. Room 313 trembled. The door slammed, then suddenly shut tight. Silence fell, as if a giant hand had snuffed out the storm. Ethan collapsed, gasping, drenched in sweat and blood. Ryan rushed forward, clutching him. "Ethan, you're alive! Oh God, you're still here!" Chloe fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around them both, tears streaming. We thought we lost you." Ethan, exhausted but with eyes brighter than ever, looked at the door of room 313, now still, no knocking, no darkness spilling forth. But he knew it wasn't truly over. A whisper floated through the air, so faint only Ethan could hear. "I will return." He closed his eyes and shuddered. The hallway slowly returned to silence. The flickering fluorescent lights steadied at last, casting their pale glow on the peeling, water-stained walls of the old dormitory. Ethan sat slumped on the cold tiles, chest heaving, while Ryan and Chloe pulled him shakily to his feet. "We need to get out of here. Now," Ryan rasped, his eyes fixed on the door of room 313, as if it might burst open again at any moment. The three of them bolted down the stairwell, their footsteps echoing through the deserted halls. Rain still hammered the windows, the wind howled, but all that mattered was escape, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and that cursed building. By the time they reached the lobby, they nearly collapsed onto the worn wooden benches. Chloe clutched Ethan's arm, inspecting the wound he had slashed open earlier. The blood had dried, but her eyes were swollen with tears. "You almost died, Ethan," she whispered. "But I didn't," Ethan answered, his voice faint but steady. For a fleeting moment, he thought it was all over. The hallway, the knocking, the nightmare. It had been pushed back into the shadows. Yet deep inside, Ethan felt the unease remain, a knot that refused to loosen. That night, none of them dared return to the dormitory. Ryan drove them to a small inn near the city center. The lights were warm, the television chattered, the hum of life surrounded them. It all felt so normal, so ordinary, so much so that the horrors they'd faced seemed like a fever dream. Chloe fell asleep the instant her head touched the pillow. Ryan sat at the window, smoking in silence, his gaze hollow. Ethan sat at the desk, staring at his hand, at the crimson wound carved into his flesh. In the warm lamplight, the cut looked less like an injury and more like a mark. The phone rang. Ethan's phone, an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" No reply, only a faint, drawn-out breathing, cold as ice. Ethan's stomach turned. "Who is this?" Then came a voice, weak, broken, but unmistakable. "Room 313. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the floor. Ryan spun around, alarmed. "Who was it?" Ethan, pale, whispered. "It's not over." That night, Ethan did not sleep. The whisper lingered in his mind, circling, repeating. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw that door, room 313, glimmering faintly in the dark, waiting for him. The next day, rumors spread across campus. Dormitory Block B, home to room 313, had been sealed off. The administration cited electrical malfunctions and unexplained disturbances. They promised an investigation, but Ethan knew no one would dare step inside again. Ryan moved out, renting an apartment far from campus. Chloe transferred to another school altogether. But Ethan stayed. Perhaps he had no choice. Perhaps, in truth, he already belonged to that room, bound by blood, by will, by something he dared not name. One night, Ethan sat alone in the library. Before him lay stacks of old archives, yellowed newspapers, and faded reports. He turned page after page until his hand froze on a name. Daniel Carter, student missing since 1973. Last seen, room 313. A photograph stared up at him. A young man, smiling, eyes bright, eyes that Ethan recognized, eyes he had seen in his dreams. His pulse raced. A question cut through him like a knife. If Daniel never left that room, then what was it that came out that night? Ethan shivered. His gaze dropped back to the page. A black stain spread slowly across the paper, bleeding outward beneath Daniel's photo. Ethan jerked back, but the dark liquid clung to his fingertips. It wasn't ink. It was blood. From across the library, the old clock began to toll. Click, click, click. The hands pointed to 3:13 a.m. Ethan lifted his head, and in the reflection of the fogged window pane, he saw himself. But the smile was not his own. After that night in the library, Ethan began to change. Those who knew him noticed it immediately. His eyes always glazed, fixed on some unseen point in the distance. When he spoke, he often stopped mid-sentence, lips moving faintly, as though listening to commands whispered from the void. Ryan still called him now and then, but their conversations grew shorter and shorter. Once, Ryan swore he heard a slow, deliberate knocking over the line, like the tick of the old clock in Dormitory B's hallway. Ethan said nothing, then hung up. Chloe refused all contact. She dreamt of room 313 lit every night, though she lived hundreds of miles away. In the dream, a figure stood at the window, half its face shrouded in shadow, but its eyes burning bright, cutting through her like knives. Chloe would wake screaming, drenched in sweat. Finally, she blocked every number that belonged to Ethan. On campus, new rumors spread. Some swore they saw the light in room 313 flicker at midnight, even though the door had been sealed with cement. Others whispered that, when passing Block B, they heard voices calling their names. The administration sent staff to inspect. Every time, they returned with vague reports. Nothing unusual detected. But none of those employees kept their jobs for long. They always resigned after a single visit inside. Then, a strange rumor surfaced. In the student records, a new name appeared, Ethan Carter. The strange part, Ethan's surname had never been Carter. When anyone tried printing the list, the name vanished. But on the original file in the registrar's office, it remained, neatly inscribed, as though Ethan and Daniel had fused into one. One stormy night, Ryan, drunk and desperate, returned to the dorm, determined to prove it was all in his head. He staggered through the corridor, the stench of mold filling his lungs. As he neared room 313, he froze. The cement seal was cracked, long fissures crawling outward like skeletal fingers. And on the wall, scrawled hastily in a dark, sticky substance, 313, Next time, it's you. Ryan fled, his heartbeat thundering, never daring to look back. But as he passed through the school gates, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You just left, didn't you? I saw everything." It was signed, Ethan. The next day, Ryan was gone. His car was found abandoned on a bridge, the radio still playing, the driver's door hanging open. The seat was empty. When Chloe heard the news, she collapsed. She felt the circle closing in. That night, she dreamed again, the door of room 313 swinging open. The light was on. Ethan stood inside, but his face was twisted, his voice echoing as though many mouths spoke at once. "The room always needs someone. Now, it's our turn, Chloe." She jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat. Her phone screen glowed on the nightstand. A missed call, the number, 313. From that night, Chloe never returned to class. Her student record was marked as withdrawn voluntarily. But in the dorm registry, a new name appeared beneath Ethan Carter, Chloe Carter. The following semester, a group of new students received their room assignments. At the front desk, the old manager handed them keys with a faint, mocking smile. One girl frowned at the list. "Weird. Someone's been assigned to room 313. "That can't be right," her friend said. "That room's still sealed." "No, look, the lock's been changed, and the light's on." That night, from across the rain-soaked campus, the third-floor window glowed again. A warm, golden light spilled across the glass, and in its shimmer, the faint silhouette of someone stood inside, silently watching the courtyard below. Carried by the wind, a whisper drifted across the dark. "Room 313 always needs someone to stay." If your heart just trembled for a moment while hearing this story, leave your thoughts below. Who knows, maybe your experience was once the same. And if you want to keep walking with me into the next chilling nights, don't forget to hit subscribe. Be prepared, because the darkness has never slept. And next time, it just might call your name.